Alright, in this video we're going to look at using the Modbus Master Configurator, a new addition to the CODESYS programming environment. So the Modbus Master Configurator, again, is an extension of the WAGO-I Pro programming tool, and is used directly in that programming environment. The Modbus Master Configurator can simplify the Modbus network configuration within the project, connecting WAGO devices to other devices, whether they be other WAGO drops on the network or third-party devices, using the controller as a Modbus master. And we can either use Modbus TCP or UDP with this. You can see here in the graphic as well that you can also set up a Modbus master with Modbus RTU using serial communications. And again, with this, you could use Modbus devices from WAGO, which could be, our 880 controller or 352 coupler, as well as Perspecto panels, Speedway products. All this stuff could be utilized within this master configurator, as well as third-party devices, so it doesn't have to be a strictly WAGO system. So let's get into the tool a little bit and take a look at how we set this up and utilize this with WAGO. Okay, so now we have the CODESYS environment open here. I'm going to start a new project, and just so you know, this version of CODESYS is 23946, and the Modbus Master Configurator actually started in 23944. So if you have an older version, obviously it doesn't support that, and you want to get that updated, and I'll show you where you would see that right away when you're starting up your project. But so anyway, I'm going to come in here and start a new project. The first thing, of course, I want to do is select my controller. In this case, we're going to be using the 750-880. So select the right driver there. Nothing we have to do specifically here, so okay. And just do a simple ladder program here for this exercise. So from here, our main screen, again, nothing different there from starting any other project in CODESYS. We will now go over to our Resources tab, and then to the PLC configuration. And then right in here, I expand this one level, this hardware configuration, and I would see right away this Modbus Master. And when like I said, from version 4.4 on, this will be available. So this is what I'm looking for as far as the Modbus Master Configurator. You can see it here. And now I'm going to go into this network view. And I will see displayed here the network configuration. So here I have a Modbus Master that I want to set up. I'm going to right key click here and add an Ethernet interface. Alright, now at this point, like I said, we can actually go out there and scan the network and see what devices are out on the network connected to my system. And of course here you want to make sure you have your communication parameter set up like you typically would in the CODESYS project. But now I can click on this interface, right key click, and have it find devices. So in this case, I'm using 10501 through 1050254. I can have it search the network and find the devices on the network. And then I can select the device and then add it to my system that way by automatically scanning it. And you'll see here there's obviously a big benefit to being able to scan the device and find it on the network. Because then it will actually configure the node for me, and we'll get into that in just a moment. It just takes a second for it to go out and scan the network, see what devices are out there. I'm going to select this .4 because this will be my Modbus slave on the network, and now I can expand it to this level. And when I do this, now you can see I have the Modbus slave, the IP address of the device, of course, I'm connecting to. And now I can look in the K-bus to see what modules are actually being utilized and the process image on the controller, or the coupler in this case, or whatever slave device over Modbus. Because this device, I'm going to actually just use this as a coupler or dumb drop if you will on the network, as a just a device on the network with no program running on it. I'm going to just directly write to these outputs and view the inputs on here. So What I can do in here now, of course, is just change this value in here and use these variable names in my actual program. Okay, just to simplify things, I went ahead and just declared all these variables without recording all of that. So here you can see the outputs, these control relays, and then our speed references here, for example, on the analog side as well, the analog outputs. And you can see again here our function codes are defined, and the Modbus registers that we want to read and write, and everything's defined in here. So with the just using the function blocks by themselves from the library files, we had to define all of this within the function block itself in the declaration editor, using variables and stuff like that as inputs. Here you can see once I've scanned the node, that is clearly defined by the configuration tool, and I no longer have to do that manually, and then we're going to see the function block in just a moment when we utilize it within the actual code. A couple other points here. For example, you can also come in here and add a slave manually. So you could come in and select a module in here, for example, one of the WAGO devices, or use this generic for some third-party device. But you can see again all the options here with selecting within the WAGO family. Another thing that you can do is you can actually take a node from one project and copy and paste it right into another. So for example here, I'm just going to right key click and paste, and this Modbus slave 2 here is going to be the Speedway device we're going to communicate with in this exercise. So you can see here I'm looking at the inputs and outputs on this node here via Speedway, and I can just copy and paste that from one project right into the other. So again, several ways just to handle the configuration side of this with regards to whether you want to manually build the node up, or the network configuration up and build the modules up. You can scan the network and find the devices, or you can just copy and paste from one project into another. Also in here you will see that you can add a serial device. So your communications here, in this case COM2, by default the first serial card added to the system, and then you can come in and obviously edit and configure that as well. Our primary focus right now is on the Modbus TCP UDP side, but again, just wanted to show you that. There's more details too, of course, going into this further as far as in the manual. Of course, I could spend hours on this just talking about it, but just wanted to give you a quick overview of how easy it is to set one of these up and use it. So if you want some more details about other things you can do in here, for example, you can come in here and do things like edit this part of it as far as whether I want to use UDP, TCP, modifying the address, the service settings, and things like that, your ports and all that, and your timeout. So again, all that can be configured in here. So again, just showing you the setup side of this. We can go ahead and remove this from the project, and again, you're just looking at using these variable names in here. I'm going to show you later on, if let's say this was a controller running a program, then we're not going to have this direct write access, if you will, to these outputs. So I'm going to show you how you can actually use different registers to put data in, and then move that data within that project, for example. So again, primarily just focusing on this part, the setup initially. So once we've finished the setup with the nodes and how we're going to point to those and their address and so forth, then we can click on OK. And then one thing we're going to make sure we do here is, of course, save our configuration and generate code. And you'll see that when we come over here, you'll see this configuration and this PLC_PRG, again, this based on the configuration folder, this Modbus Master. So we're going to save the configuration, then generate code. And you'll get a little thing saying, hey, anything you generate now will remove anything from you've previously created for the Modbus Master program. And then yes, and then you can see over here in our POU tab the actual function blocks that have been created, or programs I should say, and with the Modbus slaves that we created. And you can see in here, here's the declaration of the variables, the configuration of the actual communications as far as IP address, port, and so forth. And then again with this one as well. Okay. And now we're going to actually take these and place these into the project itself, into our main routine here. So here we can see in the CODESYS, again under the POU tab here in the CODESYS tool, I've just created a few lines of code here, again trying to speed the process up a little bit here, just to create some data, something to transmit, if you will, to send to the slave devices. So just writing to my OutData1 here, for example, you can see if I come up here, I have an array of information, and I have OutData1 through, I have an array here from 1 to 128. So this OutData1, I'm going to push that information into my speed reference values, and then here you can see I'm writing to the individual bits of information on control relays. So I have this in my actual code here for the master device. Now I want to set up the program that I'm going to call to actually communicate with the slave devices. So I'm going to right key click and network after, and then again you'll see in here I have my next rung, right key click, box with enable. Now you come down here, select the AND function, F2, find my programs, the Modbus slave, as you can see here in slave 2, for example. Select one of them, OK, and then you can see here what I've defined in that configurator as far as the variable names that I pointed to within the K-bus of the slave device. Okay, so now I can tie these variables or the variables I've created in this routine to the actual function block and then read and write information. So again, I come in here, select a variable or input, if you will, in this case writing to the control relay, and then I can just select what coil up here is going to actually write to that. So I'm going to select these, and obviously I'm going to go through this pretty quick, and then I'll come back online, but just showing you again how to select the variables that you want to write in here, the information. So for example here I'm going to use this out data, and then if you will the element within that array as an example, and so forth. And then here just on the input side there's a reset that we're going to utilize within this function block here. And then if you look up, the resets up here as far as the resetting the data here on the counter. So anyway, just little things in here. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm going to offline for a second, get all this cleaned up and finished, and then we'll come back on and look at it just to save some time. So now you can see I have the program being called here. Again, like I said, I just went ahead and put in the variable names on the input-output side, writing and reading information to and from the slave device. These are your inputs over here. By the way, you get information that can be valuable. Obviously here, this Modbus slave, error information. We can put variables in here as far as changing input information with regards to the IP address of the device, port settings, and so forth. I've also gone ahead and added this program as well, this calling of this program for the slave 2, which is again the Speedway device. Again, looking at the inputs and outputs for this program, again to the second slave or Speedway coupler. So once I've finished this, I just want to do a project rebuild all. Want to make sure there's no errors or warnings here. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that I call this for the actual project as a task. So I'm going to come over here to Resources tab and go to the Task Configuration, and then you can see here I have this Modbus Ethernet master task here, each one of these being called. And I can come in here and change the priority levels, the intervals, and stuff like that. So after I come in here, make some changes that may or may not be necessary depending upon what I'm trying to do with the system. So now that this has been configured, of course, one other thing I should do in here is add a new task, set a priority level here for my new task, and then in here we can do it based on time, so T. Okay, and then I can come in here and append, and then make sure that I call my main routine. So you want to make sure when you come in here and verify that your communications tasks are set up, then you want to make sure your main routine is being called as well, the PLC_PRG. And now we can load it on the controller and see what happens. So now you can see here the program is actually running on my master device. These are the two slave devices I'm communicating with. And then I can just toggle my inputs high and low, for example, or excuse me, my outputs to write to the actual outputs on the slave device. I'm writing to this out data, for example, and just to show you, I'm going to pull up IO check here, and then you can see as I'm toggling the values here, then it's toggling those outputs here on the output card, the digital input output card. Now I had that reset that would reset this value here. So I go high, and of course it's reset this value here based on the program, again running in the master device. And of course, as soon as I turn off my reset, my count starts going up again as far as my voltage level here. So again, just showing you, setting this up with an 880 as the master device, an 880 as a coupler, and then a Speedway node as well as a drop on the network. And just showing it's working here. And just to show you some other things too, if for example I lose communications, then I have this information here as far as the data here, what type of error condition I might be having with the device based on my communication, for example. So again, that could be useful from a troubleshooting diagnostic standpoint as well. So hopefully you'll see how this can really simplify and make things a lot easier to set up Modbus communications between a master device and the slave devices. This is again the program actually running now. What I want to show you as well is if, let's say, I had two controllers instead of a controller and coupler, if you will, so a program running on both. So just to run through that pretty quick here. So now you can see we're back in the Modbus Master Configurator tool, and here I'm referencing again the registers and coil values, bit values for the slave device. But let's not assume this is always going to be a coupler. Perhaps this is a controller, and having direct write access, for example, to these registers may not be allowed. So what I may need to do is put information into a register that I do have write access to. So I'm going to show you a couple things here. But some things too in here, you can come in and change this to either a real, string, byte, boolean, whatever the case may be, here on these PLC variables. Also in here, with reference to the function codes and what I'm going to use, you can actually change things, whether it's optimized, explicit, is it read only, write only, or no access, whatever the case may be. So for example, in here, when I had the Speedway device and I just wanted to add it to this configuration by copy and pasting, then I can come in here and I can actually edit the information with regards to whether I want to read registers, coils, inputs, discrete inputs, single coil here on the right side, register, multiple coils, multiple registers, and so forth. So yeah, you can do additional stuff in here with regards to configuration. And if I wanted to come in here, for example, and add and say I want to make this a word, and then just point this to an MW value. So now I can use this variable, write information into this MW value, then on the other controller, this slave device, if you will, I can take that MW information and use it in there, and maybe move the information, push the information to some value, whatever the case may be. But I just wanted to show you that as well, that it's not just, well, I have to scan it, and what if I want to write to some register in here, but I don't have write access directly to these specific Modbus registers because it is a controller. And of course, if it's a controller running its own executable code, you're not going to have direct write access, if you will, to the outputs. The PLC itself will have that. So again, just wanted to point that out as well, some other things you can do in here. Obviously, there's a lot of information, additional information on our website. We have PDF files, manuals for how to utilize the Modbus Master Configurator, getting into obviously more detail, but again, trying to keep this as brief as possible just to introduce you to this is just another option on how to set up a Modbus controller as a Modbus Master on the network. Hopefully you found this information useful, and please feel free to contact us for additional information. Thank you.